Hi, I'm Councillor Suzanne Richards. I represent Longsight Ward on Manchester City Council, and I also lead on women's issues. When I was thinking about what I was going to say today and narrowing down what's changed for women in the last 100 years to something that will fit into 2 minutes is quite difficult. But for me, there's probably 4 key things, and that's the vote. I think that was the first fundamental step along the way for women's equality in the last 100 years. I think following that, the First and Second World Wars created a whole change in attitude towards women's employment, what were women's jobs, about it being acceptable for women to go out and work. And then I think the establishment of the NHS following the Second World War, particularly the availability of family planning and contraception, and then the Abortion Act gave women a whole new control over their lives and their own bodies, and gave them an ability to plan their lives in a whole different way. Then I think probably for me, education is fundamental. If I think I was the first woman in my family to go into higher education and go to university, and at 15 when I was discussing that with my mum, what my options were and what I wanted to do, it really struck me that my mum didn't have any of those options. She was clever, she had the ability to she passed her exams, but the expectation was for her to go out and work. And I think the opening up of the education system and the ability for working class women to get into education has been a real step towards equality. And I think that probably brings me quite neatly along to some of the threats I see at the moment. I'm very concerned about the loss of VMA. I'm very concerned about the increases in tuition fees, and I worry that that will actually mean in the next 100 years we might see some backward steps, and I think that's a genuine fear. So I hope in terms of for the next 100 years that we do see more equality, that we see more fairness, because I think fundamentally fairness is the basis of equality. Once you have a fairer society, then follows a more equal society. At the moment, I'm very worried that the cuts that this government are putting in place are going to mean that that's not going to happen for some time. And I hope that for women, particularly in Manchester, that we work together, that we fight these cuts, that we continue our strides towards women's equality. And there's still a lot of work to do when you look at particularly women's employment and women's employments on boards. There was a report produced last week by Lord Davis, which was calling for more women on boards, but actually calling for only 25% of women to be on FTSE 100 company boards. Well, what about 50%? I think really we have to get organised, get radical, and I think that's one thing that the cuts will do. They'll get women organised, they'll bring us together, they'll unite us, and I think if we're united we can go forward and hopefully make some more radical change in the next 100 years.